Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome back to today's Daf, which is Eruvin Daf Chaf Aleph. We're on Chaf Amud Beis, 3 lines from the bottom. At the end of that third line, we have Omar Rav Yitzchak Barada. Lo yutru pasi berois. This entire allowance to carry within the confines of the board surrounding the water hole, that is only applied elo lo-oile regalim bilvad, only to the oile regal on the way to the Beis Hamikdash, who out of necessity need to use these wells containing water. The Chachamim allowed them to surround them with merely boards which form incomplete mechitzos and to carry within them. Says the Gemara, is that the case? V'atanya, haven't we learned in the Brisa? Lo yehutru pasi berois elo gabe behema bilvad. The heter is only applied to behema. Apparently, it's not limited to the behema of the oile regal. You can draw water for any behema. It says, well, my behema. What does behema mean? Certainly, it's behemas oile regalim, specifically the behemos which came along with the oile regal. Continues the Gemara, aval adam. But if a person needs to drink water, he can't draw water into the area of the bein hapasim. Rather, metapes ve'oile climbs up, metapes ve'yoid climbs down, in and out of that well, and takes his drink inside the well, but he cannot actually carry out into the area between the boards, because he has an easy option. He's not meant to rely on these mechitzas. Says more, is that the case that it can only be used for the sake of feeding an animal? This heter of pasi berois is only applied only when within this containment exists a be'er of mayim chayim, a wellspring of fresh water. Now, v'ila behema, if the point here is to feed an animal, mali chayim, what difference does it make if it's fresh water, mali michonosim, or whether it's just stored rainwater? The point is to feed your animal. He doesn't need fresh water. So apparently, it seems that it's meant to be used for a person who needs to have fresh water. Says or no. Although it's really intended for the animals, we require that the water contained therein should be of high quality and suitable for a person. Let's take a look at Rashi. Second line from the top. Says Rashi, given the mayim mashul mechitza, since it's the water that's actually granting the mechitza status to these boards, it's activating the mechitza, as we learned in Daf Chaf, that it's only when there is water present there that we regard these boards as a mechitza. So it's the water that's activating it. Being in mayim chayshuvin, we require chashuv water, prominent water. And therefore we require specifically fresh water. As Tosfos, it's not going to be used for a person in any case, so why this requirement of fresh water? Says Tosfos, true. Initially you meant to draw for the animal. If there's some water left over, you can feed it to a person. So since this arrangement of pasi berois really technically has a dual function, because the remnants of the water can be fed to a person, therefore the Gemara maintains that the water contained therein needs to be suitable for this dual function in order to provide the prominence to the area. It's considered to be a properly enclosed area for a suitable purpose, for a dual purpose of behema and adam, and therefore we specifically require high quality water. Continues the Gemara, 5 lines from the top. Gufa we just learned. Lo yutru pasi berois elo lebehema bilvad. This heter only applies for drawing water for the sake of an animal. Aval adam, but a person needs to drink, metapes ve'oile, metapes ve'yoid, climbs up and down. Now if the hole there was too wide to enable him to climb up and down, afilu adam nami, in this case, you can draw water even for the sake of the person, out of necessity. Continues the Gemara. A person should not draw water and actually directly feed his animal while he's holding the kli. But he can fill up his pail and be spill it out before the behema and have the animal drink on her own. Im kain, if this is the case that you can't actually directly feed the animal, maha ilu pasi berois. What's the point and benefit of these pasi berois? Says, well, what do you mean? Maha'ilu? Well, what's the point? Lamalis, man, to allow drawing from the water in this well. So what do you mean? What's the point? What he meant to ask is as follows. The Mishnah tells us you must leave some space at the side of the well, meaning between the boards and the well, to allow for the Roisha and the Ruba Shal Para, for the head and most of the body of the Para to enter. And we learned yesterday, the reason is to avoid a chashash, a concern that perhaps the owner will be tempted to follow his animal, who's making its way out of the pasim. While he's holding the kli, he's going to follow his animal out. So therefore we require the animal to be mostly situated inside this contained area to avoid that problem. Now, if the Mishnah tells us that that's required, apparently it's because the fellow is holding onto the kli. Now, if you're telling me that you cannot directly feed the animal with the kli in your hand, then why require the animal to be situated within the pasi birds? If you're anyway spitting on the floor, there's no concern of him carrying something out for the animal. So what's the pshat in the brisa? It doesn't allow direct feeding. Says the Gemara, we're not speaking about your typical case. Certainly, a person may directly feed his animal, and that's why we require the animal to be mostly situated within Rosh Varuba. Amar Abaye Hacha, this brisa that restricts is speaking about a unique case. We're speaking about a case be'evos ha'oim nushas harabim. You have this feeding container situated in Rishus Rabbim, Gavaya Asora, V'Reichav Arba, 10 Tfacham high, 4 Tfacham wide, which is considered to be Rishus HaYachid, V'Roisha Nichos Pasim V'Chul. And it's heading into the area between the boards, as we discussed yesterday in Avchafa and Beis, which entails a concern that perhaps the owner is going to actually do the Melacha V'Eitzah of carrying Rishus Rabbim. He'll notice that the thing is broken, he'll carry his pail out with him, etc. So that's the context of this brisa. But generally speaking, a person certainly can feed his animal directly from the kli that he's holding. Amar Yimra Ba'aba, Amarav, Ein burganan bebavel. Burganan are huts. So this concept of burganan, this halacha concept, does not apply to bavel. We know a person can walk up into 2,000 amos outside his city's boundary. Now, if there are burganim, huts, which are positioned along the road within a reasonable distance of each other, what they do is they stretch the boundary of the city. We consider that to be one continuous city, and you can keep on walking and walking until the last hut, and beyond that 2,000 amma. Says the Redeemer Ba'ab in the name of Rav, this concept will not apply in Bavel. As the Gemara will explain. V'loi pasi b'rois b'chutz la'aretz. The concept of pasi b'rois, allowing carrying within these boards surrounding the well, that will not apply in chutz la'aretz, in cities outside of Eretz Yisrael and outside of Bavel as well. Explains the Gemara, Burganan b'Bavel loi. Why can't Burganan be employed in Bavel? The shchichi bitki, because these flash floods are commonly found. So since we have these floods that wash away these Burganim, they don't have prominence, they're not enduring, and therefore they can't be reckoned with. Pasi b'rois b'chutz la'aretz loi. Why can't one apply pasi b'rois in chutz la'aretz? The l'shchichim is sifta, because the sifta, which are yeshivas, institutions, are not common, and nor are the talmidim that are making their way from one yeshiva to the other, or from home to the yeshiva. They're not commonly found along the roads, and therefore pasi b'rois, which is meant to be applied only for the sake of mitzvah, for ilah regel, or for talmidim going to learn, will not apply in those lands. So the burganim are not effective in Bavel, the pasim not in chutz la'aretz, aval ifcha, but in the reverse order, avdina certainly can do it. Meaning, burganim can work in chutz la'aretz and pasi b'rois in Bavel, due to the fact that there are yeshivas prevalent there, and there are talmidim traveling on the roads who need to partake and draw water within these pasi b'rois. Let's take a look at Rashi, 6 lines from the top. Ein burganim bebavel. The Omer bekates of Na'abrin, as the Gemara later tells us, if we have these huts outside the city, within 70 and 2/3 amma of the city, they're considered to be an extension of the city. And we can measure the boundary of the city from the hut and on. What are these things? Sukkos. huts, that the watchmen of the city construct. It's not a permanent fixture. And now Rabbi Yirmiyah tells us, the Hanuch Burgonin ein bebavel. Kalaymar. Ve'ein mis'abin meir. You cannot consider the city to be stretched by use of these burgonin. Why? The bebavel ika bitke demaya. In Bavel, floods are prevalent, are common. V'shat filuhu, which come and wash away these huts. Hilkach lechashiv midi. They have no prominence and significance because they're not lasting and enduring. That's the first halach. Regarding pasei berois, that cannot apply b'chutz la'aretz. It says Rashi b'shar rotzos levad mibavel, other lands aside from Bavel and certainly aside from Eretz Yisrael where pasei berois are effective. What's wrong with employing pasei berois in other lands? It says Rashi l'shchichim esifta lias talmidim holchem meir le'ir l'umei Torah. The institutions of Torah are not present, which will cause talmidim to travel from one city to the other to learn Torah. What's wrong with that? Upasei berois lo'ihutru elo elur golem. The pasei berois was only to be applied for oiler regel, ulkayotzim, similar situations, shalchimvar mitzvah. We have people traveling to do a mitzvah. So therefore, it can only apply in Eretz Yisrael or in Bavel, where the Talmidim are traveling to learn Torah, but not in other areas. Continues the Gemara. Ika de Amri, there's another version of this statement. Amar Yirmiyah ba'aba Amarav. Ein burgonen upasei berois loy bebavel v'loy b'chutz la'aretz. So according to this approach, he packages both together. Burgonin and pasei berois will not apply neither in Bavel nor in other areas. Explains the Gemara. Burgonin bebavel loy. What's wrong with Burgonin and Bavel? The shchichi bitki, because we have these floods. B'chutz la'aretz nami loy. Likewise, it cannot apply in chutz la'aretz, the shchichi ganvi, because thieves are commonly found who walk away with these huts. Not considered to be enduring and lasting, therefore we cannot reckon with them. So that explains why burgonin will not apply in Bavel or in chutz la'aretz. Pasei berois bebaveloi. Why can you apply pasei berois in Bavel? The shchichi maya, because water is more commonly found there. Therefore, even the travelers can make use of these streams along the roads. They don't need to go to the shasarabim, to those enclosures of rainwater, and draw from there. So they can directly use the streams. Therefore, there's no real necessity to create a pasam around the berois. Therefore, the chacham did not allow it to be used. That explains Bavel. B'chutz la'aretz nami loy. Why can't a pasam be applied in chutz la'aretz? For the reason mentioned earlier, l'shchichim mesifta, since the mesifta, the yeshivas are not commonly found there, and there are no talmidim commonly found on the roads. Therefore, there's no mitzvah use, and you cannot apply it. So according to this approach in the Gemara, both concepts, burgonin and pasei berois, cannot apply, neither in Bavel nor in chutz la'aretz. Continues the Gemara. Amalei Rav Chizda l'mari brei to Rav Huna. So Rav Chizda turned to Mari, the son of Rav Huna, brei the Rim Rabba, who was the son of a Yirmiyah Baba. So Mari was the grandson. Amri, so Rav Chizda turned to him and he said, they say about you, Asisu, you come mi Barnash, from the town of Barnash, lebei knishta de Daniel. You walk at this great distance from Barnash to the shul of Daniel. Rashi says this was a known place in Bavel where Daniel davened. So they would walk this great distance to get to the shul of Daniel. Davet klos of parsi, at a distance of 3 parsa. So a parsa is 4 mil. A mil is the Tchum Shabbos. So 12 times the allowed distance on Shabbos. But Shabbat, you do this on Shabbos. How can you do that? Amai samchisu. What are you relying on? A burgonin, on these huts along the road, which stretch your city, and you avoid the concern of Tchum? How can you do that? Ha'amar avua da'avua. Didn't your father's father, meaning of Yirmiyah Ba'aba, say in the name of Rav, Shmei Rav, Ein burgonin b'Bavel? The concept of burgonin does not apply in Bavel. So how can you rely on it? Nafak v'achle, took him out and he showed him Hanu masvasa, these destroyed cities. So he showed them a series of destroyed cities which had some structural remnants to them, mechitzis, in which case they considered to be proper mechitzis. The mavlan b'shivim av b'shirayim, that was swallowed, meaning they were situated at a continuous string of within 70 and 2/3 amas of each other, in which case we don't need burganim. These structural remnants provide an extension of the city, allowing one to walk and walk even at a distance of 3 parsa. So that's what they relied on to get to the Beis HaKnesset of Daniel. So in summary, we had halacha of burganim and pasi berois. We had 2 versions. According to the first approach, burganim doesn't apply in Bavel due to the floods. Pasi berois doesn't apply in Chutz La'aretz due to the fact that there's a lack of yeshivas. According to the second approach, he added that even regarding burganim in other cities, that can't be used. Why? Due to the presence of Ganovim. Whereas pasi berois can't even be employed in Bavel due to the prevalence of water. Continues the Gemara. Amar Rav Chiz Dorish Mori Bar Mar. So Mori Bar Mar Darshan. Ma'idich Siv. What does the pasuk mean? This is David HaMelech speaking. L'chol tichla re'isi kates. I notice there's a limit to anything. Ruchava mitzvahs chamoid. However, your mitzvah is very, very wide, limitless. Davar zeh Amri David. This reference, this concept, referring to the size of Torah, David HaMelech spoke about. V'loi pirshay. But he didn't conclude, he didn't actually give us a dimension. He said it's very, very broad. Amr Eiv, likewise, Eiv made reference to this concept to the size of Torah, V'loi pirshay. It didn't conclude with a specific dimension. Amr Yecheskel, likewise, Yecheskel discussed it, V'loi pirshay, and didn't disclose. Until Zechariah ben Ida came, Pirshay, and actually disclosed to us the dimension of Torah. So the Mashal and others explain that they were successively going deeper and deeper in Torah. We know that Torah has many levels. Pshat, simple meaning, the Remez, the Hints, the Drush, expounding Torah, and the Soy, the hidden portion of Torah. So there are 4 levels, and each one, David HaMelech, and then Eiv, Yecheskel, and ultimately Zechariah, they proceeded deeper and deeper, successfully to the depth of Torah, and each one of their descriptions reflected the level of Torah that they were referencing. Let's begin with David, who was referencing the more basic dimension of Torah. Amroi David le Pirshay. David referenced the Torah, the size of Torah, but didn't give us a specific dimension. To everything I noticed, it was given a kate, an end, a dimension, a limit. However, when it comes to Torah, to your mitzvahs, your mitzvah is so broad. So he's referencing the more basic element of Torah, the single dimension of Torah that is very broad. Likewise, Eiv discussed this concept of the size of Torah, and he didn't conclude, he didn't give us an exact dimension. So it's longer than the land, the Ruchava Miniyam, broader than the ocean. But here he's already making reference to 2 concepts, the length and the breadth. So he's referring to the next level of Torah, the double dimension of Torah. Continues the Gemara, the 3rd level, Amr Yecheskel made reference to it, but didn't give us a limit. He spread the scroll of Torah sheba'al peh before me, it was written in the front and the back. The Kasuv Eleha Kinim v'Hegavahi. So in it was written Kinim and Hege and He. Explains the Gemara. Kinim is referring to the hardships, difficulties that tzaddikim experience in this world to cleanse them of their impurities. We find that Kinim is a reference to misfortunes. What's the next thing that was written in the scroll? V'Hege. That's something joyous and delightful. Zumatan Zachar Shal Tzadikim Lasalove. This is a reference to the reward granted tzaddikim in the world to come. Referring to the joyous moment with a harp. So the singing and the joy involved with playing an instrument. So Hege is referring to something positive, the joyous experience of tzaddikim lasalove. What was the 3rd item in that Megillah? V'hai. What is that? Zuri Paner Nusan Shatz Rishayim Lasad Lavai. This is speaking about the misfortunes of the Rishayim, which they will experience Lasad Lavai. We find that Hai is a reference to this negative thing, happening upon a happening will come. So Vahai is referring to something negative, a misfortune, which will befall the Rishayim in the world to come. So we have David HaMelech, we have Eiv and Yecheskel, who describe the immense size, proportions of Torah, without giving us a specific dimension. Ad Sheboy Zechariah ben Idoi Upirshi, until Zechariah came and he actually gave us a dimension. What are you seeing? I said, I see a folded scroll, Arka Esrim B'ama, which is 20 amas long, Ruchava Eser B'ama, 10 amas wide. This was folded. Now when you unfold this, you have a double area. Havila Esrim B'Esrim. So from 20 by 10, you unfolded it. Now you have 20 by 20. Uksiv, and it says Iksuva Panam B'Acha. It was written in the front and the back. Now when you go and you peel that, split that into two, and you place the portion of the Panim alongside the Panim of the Achar, because it was written front and back, and you split that along its thickness into two. Kal Mahavila, now you line both of them up side by side. How much do you have? So each one was 20 by 20. Now you have Arba'in Be'esrin, 40 by 20. So we have a Megillah here, which is describing the Torah, which is 40 amas long by 20 amas wide. Let's stop for a moment. We see how they went further and further into the Torah, because we have Yecheskel, who described the Torah as being Panim V'Achar, right? He said it was Vayifer Salafanai, it was spread before me, it was written in front and the back. So you see he's referencing not only the revealed portion of Torah, also the hidden portion of Torah. Panim V'Achar. Now we have the next level of Zechariah, who's describing the Torah as being folded and written in the front and the back. So it's like 4 dimensions of Torah. This is the next level, the 4th dimension of Torah. In any case, what was the size? Gemara tells us we have a total of 40 by 20. Uksiv. Now regarding the size of the world, the pasuk says, Mi madad b'shalemayim, who measured with his fist, Hashem's fist, the water of the world, v'shamayim by zeres tikein, and the sky with his zeres. He established zeres is the distance between the thumb, the tip of the thumb, and the tip of the pinky when the fingers are stretched out. So this equals a half amma. So zeres here is in reference to a half amma by half amma, so a half amma square. That's the size of the world. Now if the Megillah, referencing the Torah, encompass the size of 40 by 20, now let's calculate how many times can a half amma square fit into an area of 40 by 20. Rashi makes the calculation for us that 40 by 20 actually equals 1,600 amma square. Now if we take the half amma square of the world and we fit into there, so it's actually 1 out of 3,200. That's how the Gemara concludes. Nimtza, it turns out, the entire world, the size of everything is echad mishleish alafim u'masayim b'Torah. 1 part of 3,200 of the Torah. So you see how great, how broad, how deep the Torah is. Dorish Mari Barmar. What does the pasuk mean when it says V'hinei shnei dudoi te'enim? This was Yirmiyah speaking. Look, there are 2 pots filled with te'enim, with figs, mu'adim lifnei heichel Hashem, which were prepared before the heichel Hashem. Hadud echad te'enim tovis ma'od. 1 pot, 1 copper pot here was filled with very high quality figs. Kete'enei habachurais, the high quality figs like those that ripen fast. V'adud echad, and the other pot was filled with low quality figs, te'enim rois ma'od, inferior figs, that can't be eaten due to their inferiority. So what does this mean? Te'enim atoivos, that's a reference to tzadikim gemurim. Elu tzadikim gemurim. Te'enim arois, elu shaim gemurim. V'shem atoima, perhaps you'll say, avad sivram, their hope is lost, referring to the Rishaim, batal sikuyim, and their future has been nullified, meaning there's no chance, there's no hope for them. They can't make their way back. Talmud loima, the pasuk says, the pasuk in Shir Shirim, hadudoim, both dudes, both containers, nosnu reach, gave forth a fragrance. Elu ve'elu, both groups of people, tzaddikim and rishonim, eventually, asidim, shitnu reach will exude a fragrant smell. Even the Rishayim, when they're cleansed of their misdeeds, a Yid is inherently good. His goodness will shine forth. Darash Rav, Ma'idich Siv, what does the pasuk mean? Hadudoim nas nereach. Elu v'achor Yisrael, referring to the young men in Klal Yisrael shalei tamu tamchet, who have not experienced, not tasted, a taste of chet. Ha'psachenu kol megadim, that's referring to Elu b'nei Yisrael, the daughters in Klal Yisrael shemagidos peschein baleim. They reveal their psachon, their openings, meaning they inform their husbands when they become nida and they're off limits. They tie up their openings and reserve it for their husbands. So the pasuk here is saying both these groups are so great and praiseworthy. Nos nerech, they exude forth this beautiful fragrance. The pasuk in Shir Shirim continues, Chadoshim gam yishonim doidi tzefanti lach. So Shir Shirim is an expression of love and ava, extolling the virtues of our relationship with Hashem, the closeness and warmth that we experience with Hashem. So the pasuk here says, Chadoshim gam yishonim, the new ones as well as the old ones. Doidi, my beloved, my Hashem, tzefanti lach, I've safeguarded for your sake. What is this referring to? Amra k'nes Yisrael v'nagadish baruch. Ribono shel olam. So Klal Yisrael turns to Hashem, Ribono shel olam. Harbe gzeros. Gzarti al atzmi. You know that I've enacted many decrees, many takonis, gzeros, safeguards. I've done it on myself. I've volunteered to do it. Yoser mimasha gzarti alai. Even more, greater in number than the gzeros that are found in the written Torah. V'kiyamtim. And I was mekayim them all. I fulfilled not only the Yishanim, which is the Torah sheba'al, but even the Chadoshim, even the Torah sheba'al peh, which was more recently introduced. Amalei Rav Chizda, lo midrabanan. Rav Chizda turned to this person, that became a Sader Agad Kamei, who was accustomed to arranging divrei Agada. He was well versed in Agada. He would arrange it before Rav Chizda. Rav Chizda asked him, Mishmei, have you ever heard the pshat in the pasuk, Chadoshim gam yishanim ma'u? What is this pasuk referring to? Amalei, he told him, Elu mitzvahs kalis, ve'elu mitzvahs chamuris. Chadoshim is referencing the less severe mitzvahs. Ve'elu mitzvahs chamuris, yishanim is referencing the more severe mitzvahs, which involve a greater punishment, perhaps. Amalei, Rav Chizda told him, you can't say that. V'chi Torah pa'amim nitna. Was the Torah sheba'al given in many phases, many stages? These are new, these are old. Ella, rather, the correct interpretation is Halalim divrei Torah. Yishanim is a reference to the divrei Torah sheba'al, which was given earlier. V'alalim divrei Seifrim, Chadashim, is a reference to the more recent Gzeris and Takanes, which were introduced through the Chacham and through Torah sheba'al peh. Darash Rava, Ma'idich Siv, what does the pasuk mean? V'yoser mehema b'ni. So initially the Psukim was speaking about Torah sheba'al. Now the pasuk says v'yoser mehema, even more and greater than those. The Torah sheba'al. B'ni, my son, hizar, be careful. Asois farm harbe v'goyim. What does this mean? B'ni, my son, hizar b'divrei seifrim. Be careful. Hold on and safeguard. Fulfill the divrei seifrim, the words of Torah sheba'al peh, the gzeris and takanis, which were introduced by the Chachamim. Yoser b'divrei Torah, even more than you're careful with divrei Torah. Why? Shedivrei Torah yesh ben asay v'lo asay. In the Torah sheba'al, there is contained asay and lo asay, which not necessarily involves a chiv misa. In contrast to Torah sheba'al peh v'divrei seifrim, kol ha'over al divrei seifrim chayiv misa. One who transgresses the words of the Chacham is chayiv misa. As Rabbi Yen explains, because when it comes to being over an aver of Torah sheba'al, a person sometimes is overcome by desires, overwhelmed by Yetzer Hara. And that's the motivation. As opposed to Torah sheba'al peh, where sometimes a person can be inclined to merely disregard the importance and significance of the Torah sheba'al peh, and therefore be over it. So to disregard, it's due to a lack of respect to the Torah sheba'al peh. And what this does is, it ruins, it destroys our whole system of Masorah tradition, which safeguards the adherence of Torah. So this destroys the whole system, and the result of this is chayav misa. So kol ha'over al divrei seifrim chayav misa. So therefore the pasuk is telling you, is warning us, B'ni, my son, be more careful, even when it comes to fulfilling divrei seifrim, more than divrei Torah. Shema Taimar. Okay, so the pasuk continues to address our response. Perhaps we'll say, if it's so important, if the very sefer are so significant, so why weren't they recorded? As opposed to as the Torah Shebechsav was written down. That's what the pasuk continues and says. You know what the reason is? Asoy Svarim Harbein Kates. There'll be no end to the Svarim. We're going to record all the Torah sheba'al peh. Torah sheba'al peh was the allowance for us to perceive Torah the way we perceive it, to apply our own formulas, to expound and to delve into it, to analyze, etc. It's endless. So we're going to write it down. You have Svarim Ein Kate, and that's the reason, not due to lack of importance and significance. And the pasuk concludes there, V'lag harbe yigias basa. Explains the Gemara. Amar Papa Breder of Achabar Ad. Meshveder of Achabar Ula. Malamed that teaches us Shkola Malik. So lag is referencing being malik, making a mockery. He makes fun. Malik al divrei chachamim. He mocks the words of the chachamim. Nidain b'tzoyer isachas. So yigias basar, the work of the flesh. It means the waste of the person, and his punishment is nidain b'tzoyer isachas. He was judged with heated up waste. So that's lag harbe yigias basar. Maskiv l'rava. Miksiv lag. The pasuk doesn't say la'ag with an ayin. La'ag siv. Rather, it says Rava, the pasuk here is actually referencing a positive thing. Ella kalahiga ben. One who immerses himself and thinks into Torah. Rashi says it's a constant mental involvement. Toyin tam basar. He's sure to taste the rich flavor of basar. Even though he's constantly thinking and learning, he'll constantly feel and taste the beauty and the sweetness, the rich flavor of basar Torah sheba'al peh. Tana Rabbanan, Mas Rabbi Kiva. There's a story to Rabbi Kiva, Shayichavash Beis Asur, who was in prison. This was when he was teaching and learning and teaching Torah, and the Romans locked him up. V'hoya Rabbi Shua Hagarsi Mesharsei. Rabbi Shua Hagarsi was his servant. B'chol yom v'yom, on every day, hoya machnisin lo yimai b'midah. They would bring him a measure of water, a small amount of water. Yom echad, one day, Mosoi Shem Beis Asur. So the jail guard finds Rabbi Shua carrying the water. Amar Loi, so he told him, Hayoim Memechem Eruvin. Today it appears to me like you have lots of water there. Mashal points out certainly it was the same exact measure, but he was just looking for trouble to give him a hard time. So he says, look, you have so much water, Shem Malachter, Beis Asur Matatzarech, perhaps you can try to dig yourself way out of the tunnel with this water. Why does Rabbi Kiva need so much water? Shafa Chetzion. So this guard spilled out half the water of V'nasan Chetzion and handed him the other half. Kshabat Rabbi Kiva. When Rabbi Shua arrived to Rabbi Kiva with this small measure of water, Amalai, so Rabbi Kiva told him, Yeshua, Einata Yedeh, do you not know? Shazakan Ani. I'm an elderly man, V'chayai Tzluim V'chayecha, and my life is dependent on yours, meaning I only have what you provide for me. So Yeshua related to him the whole story with the jail guard as he went ahead and he spilled out the water. Amar Loi, so Rabbi Kiva responded, Tainli mayim she'etal yadai. Hand me the water so I can wash my hands, I can eat my meal. I can do it until Sedayim. Amar Loi, so Rabbi Shua responded, you're going to wash your hands with this small measure of water. Lishtois in magim, there's not enough there to provide you for your drinking purposes. Little yadecha magin, there's enough there to wash your hands. Why are you going to use it to wash your hands? Amaloi, so Rabbi Kiva responded, Ma'aseh, what choice do I have? Shechayav and alei misa. One is liable to misa if he ignores the mitzvah of the chachamim. He doesn't wash his hands prior to a meal. Mutav amos misas atzmi. It is better that I should bring about my own death by ignoring my needs and not drinking. Rather than being over on the will, on the takon, on the gzeira of my friends, and not washing my hands. Taisus points out that certainly Rabbi Kiva Apidin was pater from Til Sedayim, as we learned earlier in Daf Yud Zayin, that even the soldiers on the way to war are pater from Til Sedayim. So Minadin, due to the difficult situation, he would have been pater, but Taisus says, Machmer al atzmei oya, he was being more stringent with himself. Omru, so they said that what indeed happened, Lo yitam klum, he refused to taste anything until he he offered him the water of Natal Yadav, and he washed his hands. So he was Ma'aseh Nefesh V'Ntil Sedayim. When the Chacham heard about this episode, Amru, they exclaimed in amazement, Ma b'zeknusei kach. If we see that he conducted himself in his zikna, in his old age, in this stringent manner, he was so makbid. Bi'aldusei kachas kama v'kama, certainly in his youth, when he was stronger and was able to endure more, of course, he was very meticulous with his adherence to the Gzeres and Takanos of the Chachamim. If this is the way he behaved in the Beis Asurim, in the most difficult circumstance, certainly he was meticulous in his adherence to the mitzvahs when he was outside of the confines of the Beis Asurim. When Shlomo HaMelech was Mesaken, the following two Gzeres. Eruvin, number one, he prohibited carrying, for instance, from one's house to the courtyard, which is shared by many. So he did not allow transfer of a chayfetz from one Rishus Hayach to the other, unless you make an Erev Chatzeres, which merges the usage area into one residence and makes it into one dira, in which case it doesn't appear like he's taking from one Rishus to the other. And what was the basis of this Gzera? To avoid confusion. A person might think, well, if I can carry from one Rishus Hayach to the other, likewise I can carry from Rishus Hayach to Rishus Rabbah. Therefore, he established the Takana of Erev Chatzeres. So that was number one. Unetil Sedayim, and he enacted the Takana of Netil Sedayim. The Gemara Shabbos tells us actually this was the first phase of the Takana to require one's hands to be washed prior to coming into contact with Karbanis Kachim. So Rida Mishmol tells us at that point when he was Mesakin, Yotza Baskel v'Amr, the Baskel called out and said, B'ni, my son. These are psukim and mishlei. B'ni chacham libecha. If your heart is wise, yismach libi gam ani. This will also bring joy to my heart. V'omer, and the pasuk says, chacham b'ni, be wise, my son. V'samach libi, and make my heart joyous. V'ashiva choyf v'davar, I will be able to respond to my blasphemers with this thing. So actually, the Gemara Brachas, Daf Gimel, seems to say there that these psukim, as the Mashal explains, was written by Shlomo HaMelech in Mishlei. He was the author of Mishlei, but it's in reference to David HaMelech, the way he expressed himself on account of the takanos that Shlomo HaMelech enacted in the future. And this brought him great joy and achas. Dorash Rav Maidechsiv, what is the meaning of the pasuk? These are psukim in Shir Shirim, which express our warmth and loving relationship with Hashem. L'cha doidi, go my beloved, referring to Hashem, Neitzi Asad, let's go out to the field. Let's sleep over in the villages. Nashkim l'akramim, get up in the morning to the vineyard. Nira, let's take a look in Parcha Geffen. If the vine has already flowered, pitach asmadar. If the bud has already developed, hinetzu remainim. If the pomegranates have already fully ripened. Shom eten es doidi lach. Over there, I will present you with my warmth and closeness. Explains the Gemara. This means Amra Knesset Yisrael Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Klal Yisrael turns to Hashem as follows: Ribono shel olam, al tidineni ki yeshei kracham. Don't treat me and judge me. A reference of the yeshei kracham. Don't compare me to the ones that are city dwellers. Sheyesh bam gezel v'arayos. In the city, it is common to have these negative behaviors, gezel, stealing, v'arayos, shvashos, sheker, useless and falseless promises. Don't look at that. Ignore that. Rather, neitzi asada. Let's go out to the sada. Boi v'recha. Come, I'm going to show you the goodness, the inherent goodness in Klal Yisrael. Talmidei Chacham she'oskim b'Torah mitun chatchak. I'm going to show you Talmidei Chachamim who are immersed in Torah, even when they're in difficult situations. They're out in the fields plowing, overwhelmed by parnasa concerns. Still, no, they find time to immerse themselves in Torah. Nalina b'kfarim, al tikri b'kfarim. Rather than say kfarim, read ella b'koifrim. What does that mean? The deniers of Hashem. Boi v'recha, come, I'm going to show you. Oisam sheshpata lehen tova. Those fellows who you've endowed them, granted them your goodness. What happened? As a result, how did they respond? They turned their backs to you. They denied you. They don't listen to you. So that's what happened to those kaifrim. In contrast with the Klal Yisrael, who is fully immersed, and Chachamim fully immersed in Torah, and adhere to mitzvahs, to Gzeros, Nakshkimel Akramim. Let's get up and take a look at the vineyards. Elu Batim Knesses Bat Midrashos, referring to these places where the Talmidim are sitting in rows like the vines. Nira, let's come take a look. In Parcha Geffen, if the vine has already flowered. What is this referring to? Elu Balei Mikra, referring to the ones that are involved in learning Chumash. That's the first phase of Torah, Chumash. So the vines have begun flowering. Next step is the more developed portion of Torah. Pitach Asmad, let's take a look and see if the bud has already developed. Elu Balei Mishnah. These are the ones involved in Mishnah, which develop Torah even further, expound and explain the words of Torah Sheba'al. What's the third phase? Heinetzu Remind. Let's take a look if the pomegranates have already ripened. Elu Balei Gemara. This is the next stage. The ones that are immersed in learning Gemara, which analyze and delve even deeper into the words of the Torah. They expound further than the Mishnayos. This is the completion of Torah. Come, let's take a look. What's going on? Look how involved and immersed they are in Torah. What does that mean? I will show you kvoidi, my honor, v'goyli, and my greatness, shach b'ronai b'noisai, the praise of my sons and daughters. Look how immersed they are in Torah, how committed they are to you. As we mentioned earlier as well, the Bachurim Yisrael, the Bnei Yisrael, they're so careful. Safeguard themselves from doing affairs. Amar Rabbi Nuna, my dechsiv, what does the pasuk mean? This is in Malachim, in reference to Shlomo Melech. Vayidaber shloishes alafim mashal. So Shlomo spoke 3,000 mashal, 3,000 analogies, metaphors. Vayish shiroi, his song contained chamishav elef, 1,050. Melamed, what does this teach us? Shama Shlomo, al kol davar v'davar shal Torah. On every word, every halacha of Torah, Shlomo Melech explained shloishes alafim mashal. Explained it with such depth, providing 3,000 different angles, 3,000 different mishalim to explain every matter in Torah. Sheba'al. Al kol davar v'davar shal seifrim. When it comes to every word, every din of Torah sheba'al peh, over there he explained it, chamishav elef tamim, he provided 1,050 reasons. So he presented the depth, the breadth and the depth of Torah Sheba'al and Torah Sheba'al Peh. Torah Shrava, my dechsiv, what does the pasuk mean? V'yoser, shoya kehelas chacham, more than the fact that Kehelas, Shlomo Melech was a wise man on his own, oid limeid das asam. He made sure that he actually taught Torah, das, wisdom to the nation as well. What does this mean? Limei das asam, the agmare b'simoni tamim. He presented, he packaged the Torah Sheba'al, Torah Sheba'al Peh. He packaged the words with simonim, the words and the tunes. He packaged it, he provided simonim so that it can be received properly and remembered properly. That's why he handed over the Masorah so that it shouldn't be forgotten. So he's referring to the content of Torah Sheba'al and Torah Sheba'al Peh and the songs, the tune of Torah Sheba'al as well. So he explained it and handed it over in a way to ensure and to safeguard that it endures and remains clear amongst Klal Yisrael. And he explained the halachas of Torah, comparing one thing to the other. Look, let's try to explain this by comparing it to something else. What does that mean? Amar Ula, Amar Belazer. Initially, Torah was like a basket. It doesn't have any handles to hold on to the basket. So it's an insecure basket, you can't really hold on to it properly. That was initially. Until Shlomo came and he fastened, he designed handles to hold on to the basket. This is referring to the Gzeros that he established, which safeguard the Torah as well. Let's take a look at Rashi, 6 lines from the bottom. Eruvin v'yodayim. This is the 2 takanos we discussed earlier. And also Rashi brings another Gzera, v'gazal hashnias la'rayis. So he added another phase of women that are asur, kedafarish b'yivamos. What's the point? Through these Gzeros, Klal Yisrael can actually hold on to the basket, hold on to the mitzvahs. They become distance from actually committing averis. Just as it's easier to hold on to a kli that has a handle, rather than the kli that doesn't have a handle which slips out of one's hand. So the gzeris, enacted by Shlomo Melech, provided the izain v'chikar. The izain is like those nine, the handles of the kli to safeguard the fulfillment of Torah. So in summary, we began that the pasei b'rois is a special allowance provided for the behemoths of the Erugalim. The Gemara tells us, in a time of necessity, a person as well can make use of this enclosure. So this applies to mitzvah, for instance, the Talmidim that are going to learn yeshivas. The Gemara tells us the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah Abba, who discussed two concepts. He discussed burganan, those huts, which are situated alongside the road, which are meant to extend the boundary of the city. He also discussed the allowance to use the enclosure within the pasei b'rois. There are two versions of this halach. According to the first approach, burganan cannot be applied in Bavel due to the prevalence of those floods. Let's wash them away, and therefore they have no prominence and significance. Pasei b'rois cannot be applied in other lands outside Bavel or Eretz Yisrael due to the fact that there are no yeshivas there, and no talmidim that are traveling that would make use of the pasei b'rois, which can only be applied to mitzvah use, like oile regel or talmidim going to yeshiva. According to the second portion of the Gemara, burganan and pasei b'rois both cannot be applied neither in Bavel or in other areas. And the reason is, the burganan, which are situated in other lands, are not considered to be items of endurance due to the fact that ganavim come and walk away with them. Likewise, the pasei b'rois cannot be employed in Bavel due to the fact of the prevalence of water, of abundance of water, which eliminates the necessity to make use of the pasei b'rois. The Gemara proceeded to describe for us the greatness, the great size, so to speak, of the Torah, in specific the Torah sheba'al peh. The Gemara proceeds to tell us that the gzeros and takanos of Klal Yisrael throughout the generations and adherence to the gzeros of even Torah sheba'al peh is an expression of love and commitment to Hashem. We had the story of Rabbi Akiva, who was very stringent when it came to the mitzvah of Netilas Yadayim, and Rav Shlomo Melech, who established the Daf Yomi Eruvin and Netilas Yadayim, and the Gemara concluded that he taught Klal Yisrael the depth of Torah shebachsav and Torah sheba'al peh.